Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, May 18th, 2021 meeting of the Select Board of Middleton, Massachusetts. Want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded and going out live through Zoom through the town website. If I can, I'd like to get things started with asking for the approval of warrants number 2123 and 2124. I know that we have two because we moved one from last meeting to tonight. Andy, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On warrant 2123, which is from 2 weeks ago, with a payroll amount of $709,275 and a bills payable amount of $573,265. Fairly modest bills payable total in that warrant. A couple of items of note in Public Works: $21,841 for street sweeping, $6,353 for paving, and then down a little bit further, purchase of power for MELD, $53,963. The usual health insurance deductions under the treasurer, under the schools, and then under the payroll deductions up at the top of bills payable in the amount of $88,751. On this week's warrant, number 2124, on payroll, we have $814,803, and on the bills payable side, $4,125,132. A few items of note under Public Works: $145,288 for paving. That was for Northwood, Samus, and Hemlock. And then also under DPW, $17,037 for catch basin cleaning and $13,825 for waste disposal, solid waste disposal. Under MELD, $629,177 for the purchase of power. And then our Masco assessment under the Treasurer's Department, $2,551,013. Sarah Wood has reviewed these and asks the board's positive endorsement.
Thank you. I'll
Move
take a
to accept as presented.
Thank you, Costa. In a second. All right, Mr. Hooton, if you would, please take a roll call vote.
Mr. Cresta, you're muted. Can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Fantakis?
Yes.
Mr. Cassiotis?
Yes.
And myself, yes.
All right. Okay, so the motion carries unanimously. And then if we would, we'll take the reading on the second warrant. Is that for both warrants? I'm sorry.
Yes, I moved both of them.
I'm sorry, sir. Okay, then both warrants are accepted and the motion carries unanimously. All right, on the second item, we'll take a motion to accept the minutes from the open session of May 4th, 2021.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All right, thank you. If you would, Mr. Hooton, a roll call vote, please.
Cresta?
Yes.
Mr. Fantakis?
Yes.
Mr. Cassiotis?
Yes.
And myself.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Minutes are accepted. Mr. Sheen, if you would, with your town administrator update and report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A handful of updates tonight for the board and for the public. We'll talk about reopening in greater detail in a few minutes. But it was great news yesterday to see the governor's announcement lifting most of the COVID restrictions as of most of them as of May 29th and lifting the state of emergency on June 15th. So as we've said a number of times over the past 15 months or so, thank you to everybody for everything that you did to get us through this, wearing masks and social distancing and everything that goes for residents, employees, elected and appointed officials, everybody. So appreciate the investment that everybody made in getting through this period. The Master Development Planning Committee will be on in a few minutes to present to the board again. The committee has held a number of public presentations. The first of those is running on cable and also on the website at www.middletonma.gov. Just click on the public facilities project link on the homepage. It'll bring you right to the page, and you can see the video and videos of the buildings and other associated information there. The staff at the police department, the fire department, council on aging, and here at Memorial Hall hosted an open house on Saturday, this past Saturday. We'll do it again this coming Saturday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. The buildings are open to the public, so anybody who hasn't been in these buildings and wants to sort of see for themselves, see with their own eyes the conditions that we've been talking about, please take advantage of the opportunity and come on by. This, along with the other information, is available on the town's website. We're still getting guidance on the on ARPA money, the Federal American Recovery Plan Act. Information is still dribbling out, and still trying to get a good handle on what exactly is allowable and what is not. So we're continuing to watch that. Related to that, and also to a potential infrastructure bill coming out of Washington, D.C., we've started to compile a broader list, longer list of potential infrastructure and other types of projects that we might be able to tackle with some of these funds that are available. So,
Excuse me, Andy.
Yes.
On some of the things that I read on ARPA seem to indicate that, water and sewer projects were included.
Correct.
Since we don't have sewer, I see a connection to the septic systems of the buildings in the municipal complex.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's kind of an easy argument to make that it fits that criteria.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we're looking for some additional clarity on. I would love to be able to use some of this ARPA funding for the facilities project, as well as other things, but it would be a nice way to shave some of the costs off the project if we can use the ARPA funding there. That's a little unclear whether we can do that or if it's only for existing systems. So as we continue to get more information, we'll make decisions in that regard and keep everybody up to date on that.
Has the Division of Local Services provided any guidance?
A little bit. They're all, as it trickles down from the Treasury Department, it gets sort of reinterpreted and repackaged. So I'm on a call later this week with the Treasury Department. I'm on another call with the National League of Cities, who have some, I think, closer connections to the Treasury Department. So hopefully a better, and that's in partnership with Mass Municipal Association. So we're all kind of groping in the dark for answers on this stuff, and we're excited about the possibilities, but we also don't want to step into a hole that is not a fundable or reimbursable type of project, and end up having to.
I appreciate that, but
back.
quite honestly, they're losing the rationale for the massive investment that is coming from the federal government when this was passed in, February, and we still don't even have guidance now.
Yeah, so the guidance came from the Treasury Department about a week and a half ago, and that came out as an interim final rule, which is, I think, a fairly typical approach to federal rulemaking. Mm-hmm. And so we've got that information, but there's always, the sort of between the lines of what, to Costa's earlier point, what does infrastructure include and what does it not include? So this is really a federal treasury issue more than a mass DOR DLS issue.
So have we gotten confirmation, Andy, that the portion that was supposed to be coming to Middleton that would have been for Essex County, but because there isn't a county structure anymore, there was some discussion in the beginning that the state was going to try to claw those dollars back. Has that been clarified?
Not completely, but it's pretty clear from the Treasury guidance that the majority, if not the entirety of that county money is going to trickle down to the state, to the municipalities, but it's going to go through the states. What we don't know is if there's going to be some sort of a holdback or maintenance charge, if you will.
Really? Well, I know
I'm not saying that we're hearing that. We just don't know if that's the case or if we're going to get 100% of it.
So I know that there was some discussion about post-House budget and soon to be post-Senate budget having our delegation come in.
Yes.
I think as part of that, we should be clearly telling them that for the portion that the dollars may go through the state, that we want them to be as vocal as possible, that those dollars should come completely over to the local government and do not pass go, do not pay a fine. The dollars should come directly to us. I mean, and if need be, we should also express that with our congressional delegation as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. They're scheduled to come in on June 15th. The Representative Jones, Representative Cairns, and Senator Tarr.
Okay, thank you.
A couple of other items. Last Friday, we had 3 Middleton employees graduate from the Mass Municipal Association, Suffolk University certificate program in local government leadership and management. Loretta Johnson, the assistant library director, Jillian Smith, the Council on Aging director, and Matt Armitage, the sergeant at the police department, all went through the program. They've been in the program since last September. The program that was supposed to run in person in Danvers, and for obvious reasons ended up being completely remote. So proud of the effort that they put in. It's a lot of work and a big time commitment, and appreciate also the cooperation from Melissa Gasper and the library trustees, as well as Chief Deege and Chief Sampson for allowing their employees to participate in this program. So real proud of the work that they all did, and really looking forward to having them back full, and also being able to lean on the knowledge that they've gained going through this program. And then finally, I think for about 20 years, or the better part of 20 years, we've been trying to get control of what has been colloquially known as the 16 parcels. These were parcels of Essex County land that were became part of DCAM property when Essex County was abolished in 1999. We've been trying to get those parcels from the state since I think in the early 2000s, maybe that started. We finally were able to close on 14 of those 16 parcels last week. The 2 other parcels out there, they need corrective legislation, which on its face is easy, but it's never easy to get legislation of any type. The only thing that needs to be corrected is the book and page references. So the bill to take care of that has been filed. Representative Jones and Representative Cairns filed that at the beginning of January. So we're hopeful that will take place in short order. I don't expect anything until the budget is done, but hopefully shortly after that, we'll see movement on that. So we appreciate the effort that our delegation has made in this, and the diligence that they've applied to this, as well as the assistance from Matt Cocciardi, former Middleton resident who works at DCAM and was able to kind of kickstart this thing a few months ago and get it moving again. So appreciate everybody's help, the stream team for their constant advocacy for this, and everybody else who was involved in it. So good to have this done. And that's what I've got for updates tonight, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so with that, we'll move on to the second item for tonight's agenda, and that would be the public comment period. And as usual, we will look around and see if there is anyone present that wishes to waive or take part in our public comment period? Does anyone wave?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not seeing anyone.
All right.
So
If no one objects, I'd like to take advantage of this moment in the meeting tonight in regards to the work some people have seen and regarding the rail trail. So I want to speak here as president of the Middleton Rail Trail Alliance, not the chairman of the Selectmen. It's a nonprofit 501c3 that's dedicated to creating a rail trail along the existing rail bed in Middleton and provide a place for all residents for exercise, recreation, and another way about town. It was a few years ago that it was brought to my attention that this was the type of amenity we needed here in town, and that the time was right to put the stakeholders in place to make it happen. So right now I want to update our rail trail status with phase one, which was Essex to Central Street. It's basically complete, except for some benches to be installed near the pond behind Howe Manning, behind the Kuchar Ballpark, and another one just inside of off of Essex Street. It'll be complete when we reach a couple more ADA compliance measures that are put in place. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. We move on to phase two. Folks have probably already noticed a lot of work going on at the Maple Street, Liberty Street intersection. Middleton Electric Light Department, with the cooperation of DPW, the Conservation Commission, cleared some areas to have the large two steel structures, the two steel towers that some people notice, some people don't. Installed back in the 1900s, to have them removed to make way for the phase two of our rail trail. And in that area, I know it looks a little barren at this point for some people, but bear with us as at the point we move forward, we will have that area finished off, complete with flower gardens and arborvitaes and evergreens built to put back somewhat of a screen that that area enjoyed for so long. Second phase is from Central Street through Webb Street to Highland Road. Our goal is to make it to the Middleton Danvers town line behind the Hawthorne Post Office in Danvers on Route 62. I should point out that in the middle of this is the Maple Street Bridge segment between Oak and Perkins Streets. That's in the domain of the Mass Department of Transportation to replace that bridge. And when they do, will consist of a pedestrian bridge or a pedestrian span to cross the Ipswich River, separate from the actual vehicle bridge itself. The state informs us that the bridge construction has been approved and designed. And obviously we wait for not more than just a rail trail reasons, we wait for that work to be begun and completed. Bigger part of this tonight is I wanted to update you was the let you know of all the agencies in town that are involved in this. And the spirit of cooperation has been immense. While murder is certainly an impetus for why we're getting this rail trail going, it couldn't have been done without the Middleton Electric Light Department, who owns the right of way. Was without their cooperation, we're not able to do this. Our own town Department of Public Works, our town planner Katrina O'Leary, our Conservation Commission, and Kristen Kent, the recently appointed town committee of the Middleton Rail Trail Committee, chaired by resident Charles Costigan, and many others in town, Stream Team, Council on Aging, Cultural Council, as well as our own town administrator, Andy Sheehan, local interests from contractor Dan Gill, and of course the Middleton Rail Trail Alliance. Thank you for putting up with me with that. I was a little nervous for that, but I wanted to make sure everyone knew what was going on with that, and that we have a goal in mind to try to have this completed by the time the snow flies, with any luck at all. So I want to thank everyone for all their cooperation, and we welcome any input and suggestions. As always, this is for all of us in town. This is the spirit of cooperation has been wonderful, and I just wanted to put that out there. So thank you for allowing me this time in the public comment period. All right, so with that, I'll move on to number 3, which is the Master Development Planning Committee, who wants to make a final presentation on the municipal complex at 105 South Main Street to seek the board's endorsement. And I'm not sure who I should call on first for that. Annie,
Mr.
I
Chair,
believe Annie, Rolf, Mr. Twist? I'm not sure who wants to speak on that first.
Andy, do you want to start? Would you rather me start?
Why don't you want to take it, Bill?
Go ahead, Bill.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you, Bill.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my name is Bill Renault. I'm the chair of the Master Development Planning Committee, and I'm joined by a few members of the committee. We have Annie Wilton. We have, who else is with us today? We got Frank Twist, and we have George Dow. So we've been basically, since we were here last, I believe we were here a couple months ago, to give you our initial presentation and kind of thoughts of where we were looking to move with the project. We've been on essentially a little public presentation tour over the past month and a half or so, and we've received some recommendations from the FinCom unanimously. The Master Plan Committee has recommended to move to affirmative action on the project as well, and the Planning Board has as well. So what I have, if I can share my screen, is because I believe we've already gone through most of the presentation, so I wanted to kind of focus on some of the questions that we've received about, why the whole project at once, show you some of the updated renderings that we have from our consultant, and to kind of walk through, some of the potential cost savings by doing this all at once. So if I jump in to share screen.
Yep, that should be enabled, Bill. There you go.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah. So this is basically a quick rendering. If I start with the overall proposed project, I believe you may have seen this in the last presentation, but just to give a quick kind of introduction on what we're doing. So the project proposes two buildings: a public safety building towards the northeast portion of the site. To orientate you, this is 114 to the right of this portion of the slide. We have Meadow Drive towards the bottom of the slide. The community center and town hall combined is located kind of towards the middle of the site, with essentially a new boulevard to be constructed to get into the site, with a loop road and some parking to facilitate some use of the proposed town common and community center. Essentially, the southeast portion of the site is proposed to be the new town green to host community events and whatnot. This shows an aerial view of the same project. Again, we have the main boulevard coming in, our public safety building to the right-hand side, rendering of the combined town hall and community center. Another rendering showing our public safety building looking from the town hall. In the top slide, the bottom one is showing essentially looking from 114. The main boulevard would be at the center of the screen, town common to the left, and our town hall and community center towards the back. Another rendering here showing the proposed concept for the town hall and community center with a center vestibule. That's that two-story portion here that is shown as glass in this example. Two-story town hall that has been sized by our consultant, and then again to the left would be our community center. So one of the things that we heard was, to what level are we developing this project? And so what we've done since the last time we were here is we've looked at a series of about 15 different peer community projects. Ranging from just fire stations to full, similar projects that would have a community center built in a municipal complex, and really look to compare, the peer project's average square foot cost to what we were proposing within this project. So based on the analysis, we see a huge range in what these costs can be depending on site constraints. And, we are in a very unique situation where we have we're very fortunate to have little site constraints here. We really can build whatever we want to do. But ultimately, you can see, some of these range all the way up to $1,600 a square foot. Some have been as low as, $650 per square foot. But essentially, the average of our peer project we did the analysis on was about $838 per square foot. And we're proposing a project that would average out to about $825 per square foot. And, really, I think our big takeaway from that was that, we're not looking to build the Taj Mahal here by any stretch of the imagination. We're trying to find something that really is kind of consistent with what other peer communities have done, of similar size and scale. jumping to cost analysis, and there's a lot of numbers here. So what I'll do is just kind of talk about it quick, and I have a roll-up slide that kind of summarizes all of this. But as part of our cost analysis, we looked at a series of things. We looked at a couple of year outlays. So we looked at year 2022, we looked at fiscal 25, and then we looked at fiscal 30. So we can take an analysis to figure out really what the escalation would be cost-wise to the taxpayer. We also looked at just maintenance costs. So if we were to just maintain the existing buildings based on what we've been paying for average maintenance over the past 20-something years, and basically interpolated that up into $2022. And then we went in and did an analysis of different rehabilitations. So we looked at each of the buildings and the rehabilitation that we would need to do for those. That was more of a gut renovation, keeping most of the square foot the same, smaller additions, but really looking at, what it would cost to just rehabilitate the buildings and, provide, minimal improvements, but get it up to today's standards. And then we looked at the project as a whole. So this basically is a roll-up of all of those slides. So what we've been spending in maintenance cost is somewhere around $325,000 per year is what we would expect to spend as we move into future years. And that will escalate all the way up in 2030 up to about $1.5 million. From the rehabilitation side, if we look at all of the buildings and trying to just rehabilitate those, we're seeing a number of about $27.3 million. In 2030, that escalates up to about $41 million. And then our reconstruction, which is what we're proposing, and to do all of those buildings at once. And I'll explain why we're looking to do that in the next couple of slides. But, our proposal is at $61.7 million for fiscal 22. And then we looked at, what happens if we delay this decision? What kind of dollars are we talking about? So you can see, we essentially add in, over 3 years, we'd be up to about $70 million. That escalates all the way to $84 million for essentially the same exact project, just with, with looking at inflation and annual escalation costs in construction. So why did we look to do this? So one of the big drivers for us was the current interest rates. So as you all know, we started back in 2019 with this initial, with the committee being formed. And over the past 3 years, we've seen a significant decrease in the interest rates. So we have two basic, bonds that we would be looking to seek. One would be a design bond as a short-term note. When we started out in 2019, we were anticipating getting that at about 3%, which would be a total, even though our design cost was $13.5 million, that would actually have a cost to the taxpayer of about $20.5 million in assuming interest rates that we had back in 2019. That has reduced significantly with today's dollars. So if we go with interest rates today, we'd be closer to about 1%. Which saves us over $5 million just in the design cost to the taxpayer. Then looking at the construction side, you can see here our construction cost is about $48 million. We initially were looking at our long-term bond at about 4%, which is about $82 million for just the construction component of it. Our interest rates right now are at historic lows, and we're anticipating this to be about 1.75%. What that equates to is about a $61.9 million cost to the taxpayer for our just for the construction phase. So if you look at our comparison from 2019 to where we are today, that is about a $25.7 million savings to the taxpayer over the life of this project. That is a big, big, big difference compared to what we were talking about in 2019, which really started to drive some of the decisions that the committee made over the past couple of years. Kind of rolling all of this up, our interest rate, I just talked about $25.7 million. Also, by combining the buildings into 2 buildings as opposed to 4, and then not trying to build it all at the same time, there's significant savings for economy of scale, and by being able to share certain components, whether it's training space or just having it all being constructed at the same time, saving on combined HVAC systems, that type of thing. Big savings to the taxpayer there as well. So that's about $7 million or so of town savings. And then, basically our 5% escalation. So if we were to push it out a year, that adds another $3.1 million per year. So this rolls up by doing this all at once. We're looking at a savings of about $36 million for the taxpayer. Looking at average household cost, that's just a little shy of $10,000 for the cost of the whole project per taxpayer. and about $327 per year. So, obviously a big savings and a tremendous opportunity for the town, which was one of the reasons that we're looking to push the whole project as a whole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Andy to talk about what that means for essentially taxes per year and, what the overall cost of the project will be. And, the next few slides are based on a bunch of comments that we've received from, the planning board, the master planning committee and FinCom that we've been trying to roll into the presentation to essentially give a better picture of where the project will land in each taxpayer's pocket. So, Andy?
Thanks, Bill. So as we
Andy,
yeah.
Andy, before you get to that, the slide, I can't remember which slide it was, but you were showing anticipated maintenance based on past maintenance costs
Sure.
of $325,000 per year.
Yeah. Yep.
There was a previous slide that you had, I think it was prior to that, where you were talking about what maintenance has been over the past years.
Yeah. Yep. So that's
unless I'm misunderstanding, I don't think we've ever spent $325,000 in a single year on maintenance on any of our facilities.
Yes, we have.
Yeah, we have actually. So
we have.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have. So what the analysis that we did was we looked at, we went back 25 years and looked at whatever we've been paying and interpolated that up into $2022 to be comparing apples to apples. Obviously, if we replace a roof on a building 20 years ago, it's a lot cheaper than it is to do it today. So what we did is we basically totaled historically since 99 forward all of the costs that we've paid in maintenance and average those out those years. And that's what that $325,000 represents. So it's an average of what we should be paying per year. That's how we came up with that. Is that clear?
Yeah, I mean, I thought I can understand because we went through a period of time where it was like every year we were doing about 120,000. The town was throwing into Memorial Hall, which substantially upgraded the outside windows and so forth. But as Andy found out after he got here, the building was woefully inadequate on the inside. But I think I had misunderstood what you said was that we were on average doing about $325 a year. But if you were saying that on future, based on what $2025 or $2022 would look like, I think I misunderstood you as that you were saying on average we were doing about $325 a year. And I think it's probably semantics, but I think the reality is there has been a significant amount of deferred maintenance in all of our facilities, including some that we started the last 3 to 4 years as we were starting down this project. But I just don't want folks to think that there was some $325,000 line item that was no longer going to be spent, that was sitting in our annual budget every year or in our capital budget.
No, and so one of the big pieces that we heard as we got through some of our public outreach and different meetings, people asked, well, what do we pay for maintenance on these buildings? I mean, we consider this to be essentially, money that's being thrown away. We have buildings that are essentially inadequate for the need today. So, our intent here is to demonstrate this is essentially strained investment that the town's making per year. And then with the rehabilitation piece is really to look at, okay, if we were to go and try to, gut renovate these things and look at it from, getting these up to a standard, but not really what we need, how much is that going to cost us? And that's, about half the project cost of what we're talking about for the full reconstruction. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at this for a roll up of the slide, if that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right. So
George had a comment that he wanted to make.
Sure, George, please.
Yeah, I would just like to point out that, included in this maintenance of, 340 that Brian questions is the recent upgrade to the front of the old town hall. I don't know what it cost, but what benefit did it do for the seniors? Nothing.
That's why I voted no every year on it. That's why I voted no every year, George, on it. I thought it was bad money after good.
That's it.
That's what, we're trying to point out. If, we keep doing these things and it doesn't do anything. And so it's like wasting money. And That's all I wanted to say. That was just a current example of the maintenance that we do every year that doesn't get us where we need to be.
Understood.
So as we've talked about, the total project cost that the committee has put forth is $61.7 million. That's design, construction, site work, furnishings, you name it.
And acquisition.
That's on top of the acquisition. So the acquisition is separate. Acquisition was already taken care of. But bonding over 30 years, we'll do a bond anticipation note for the design, and then a 30-year permanent financing for the construction bonds. We spent a lot of time on the method of structuring the debt, and what we wanted to do was push out some of the early impact to ease the impact on taxpayers and take advantage of some of the debt that's coming off. We've got the Flint Public Library coming off in 27, Howmaning School coming off in 2033, and some other smaller debt pieces coming off in the interim too. So the peak year for this project, the way that we've structured it, is 2034, the year after all that other debt comes off. So, and I'll show you a couple of scenarios that we've worked out. And the sort of base scenario or conservative scenario would have a year one impact, fiscal 22 impact of $352 on the average single family home. Average single family home right now in Middleton is about $640,000. In the peak year, 2034, the maximum impact would be $1,152 on the average home. And then after that, it declines every year. As I mentioned, we've put together a couple of different scenarios for how we can better manage this for the benefit of the taxpayers. And the conservative case that I just talked about is at the in that table at the bottom, and that assumes that we'll be able to bring in alternative funding sources in the amount of $2.3 million. And that's the contributions from the developer of the property at 59 South Main Street, an earmark that we expect we'll see more of from the state for the first earmark in the amount of $25,000 towards the public safety building, a capital campaign sort of modeled on the Friends of the Flint that campaign they did a number of years ago, the common offset by community preservation contributions. And then really the most important piece is the sale of town assets and the dedication of revenues that they generate going forward. Police station's a pretty easy one because of its location and its zoning. It's got legitimate market value. The other two, a little bit harder, particularly School Street, a little bit harder to quantify and project, but certainly Locust Street has value for the sale of the asset and for the taxes generated in the future. And so all of those funds that are gleaned out of the sales and the redevelopment of those properties would be dedicated and segregated, presumably, or what we would recommend is putting them into a stabilization fund that could be used annually to offset the impact on taxpayers. Again, the conservative case that I talked about a couple of minutes ago, the better case, which is basically bringing in about twice as much as that conservative case, that would bring the maximum year impact, the 2034 impact, down to about $1,000. And then the best case scenario, which would bring it down to about $800. So here are the scenarios laid out in a chart, and I know it's a little hard to see. I've got the benefit of an extra screen here, but the top line, the red line, is the the conservative case, and you can see there's a spike there in 2034 where we sort of had leveled out, and then it jumps up and then it tapers off after that. The better case scenario is a flatter progression, and the impact is pushed out a little bit further, pushed out to about 2037, 2038 or thereabouts, where it picks up a little bit for a short period of time and then tapers off. And then the best case scenario, which is that purple line, which really sort of flattens out at about 2029 and remains largely flat for about a decade, and then starts to taper off. One of the other comments that we heard, or questions we heard from people as we started on our promotional tour for the project, was how do we compare and how will we compare with our tri-town neighbors? And Boxford has an average single-family home value of about $683,000, Topsfield at about $609,000. We're in the middle at $640,000, but our tax rate is substantially lower, and our average tax bill at $8,800 is about $2,200 less than the other communities. So even with the conservative case, the worst case, if you will, we're still going to be substantially below our two closest comparable communities. And that doesn't take into account any future development that we see in the remainder of the town. It doesn't take into account just normal appreciation of the equalized valuations in town, the total value of real estate in town. So we think that picture will get even better.
So Andy, do you anticipate, let's just say that the town is successful in selling the current police station property or selling the Locust Street land, and I know there's a citizen's petition on the ballot for somebody that's actually interested in purchasing that land, but it's a zoning issue there. But based on the current zoning, is the thought that the sales revenue would go into that reserve fund plus future tax revenue, i.e., let's say Locust Street is developed into 11 homes, which turns into, $100,000 a year in tax revenue. You were also planning on taking that $100,000 and, for lack of a better term, sequestering it in the reserve?
That's correct. Yeah.
So basically what that is actually an action by town meeting saying we're going to put 100,000 in. We're not actually, every year that tax doesn't automatically go into the reserve fund, does it?
No. So mechanically, the way that it will work is that we would get to the end of the year. We would close out the year. We would get free cash certified. We'd figure out what in the case of the Locust Street project, what that generated, and then we would transfer that out of free cash and into that stabilization fund, and then it would be available to be applied towards principal and interest going forward.
So, the reality is, if I looked at those three properties and we were able to sell, we're probably looking at, in today's tax revenue base, probably between 150, maybe 170,000 a year in tax revenue.
I think that would be, that's an underestimate.
Yeah.
Because, in the case of Locust Street, if you have developed it into 12 houses at $1.5 million a house, that's 18 million times 1372. It's our tax rate. It's closer to 250 or 260.
Okay, so let's just say, for sake of conversation, it's $250,000 a year. One of the items I assume we would want to, and again, a decision of the board in the town by 1 year doesn't bind it in future years, but we would want to probably take a look at our financial policies and assume that every year we are going to keep some room within our basic spending cap to ensure that those dollars every year are sequestered, given that, as the economy goes up and down, we had some struggles this year in getting a balanced budget because of some potential revenue shortfalls due to COVID and the response on that. Is that the plan, rather than just every year at the bottom of the budget season, take a chunk of money and send it to the reserve fund? Are we going to actually build that into our financial policies?
Well,
Because the reality is this model here of those properties and the revenue, and I agree with the model. It's really truly dependent on the budget calculation, the budget development, and ultimately town meeting approval every year.
Correct. Yeah, so it certainly would be something we could build into the policies. I think would be approaching this annually with both the existing policies in mind and the commitment that we're making now to the residents going forward, and making sure that we're honoring both of those things. But certainly it could be built into the policies as well.
Okay.
That gives it a little bit more stability and longevity as you're talking about a 30-year project. The other thing to keep in mind, it goes back to one of the slides that Bill showed, and that is the impact of interest rates. And we're basing all of our projections now on the numbers that Hilltop Securities has put forth for us in the debt model that they prepared, or a couple of debt models that they prepared. And that's 2.5% in the near term for the bond anticipation notes, and 3.5% for the permanent financing on the bonds, the construction bonds. The reality in the market right now, and one of the more compelling reasons for moving the entire project forward now, is that if we were going out to bid today, we'd be looking around 1.5% on the permanent financing on the bonds. That has a tremendous impact on the overall picture, not only the long-term picture, but the annual picture. And that's what Bill has laid out there with that 1% in the bond anticipation notes, and the 1.75 in the construction bonds. So there are a lot of pieces to this that all work together to push the committee and hopefully push the town to recognize the benefits of moving forward at once.
I think if I could just chime in on one piece, Andy, too, just to kind of reinforce what you're saying. I mean, as we've gone through the public outreach, a lot of what we heard was what's going to happen with the existing buildings. How much revenue would you look to generate? All those questions. Well, I think they're all great questions. It's literally an order of magnitude different from the interest rate scenario that he's talking about here. I mean, there's a $20 million savings in the cost to the taxpayer in 1 year since we've been looking at this project. So, I mean, you're not going to get that with any sale. Even the revenue that we would be generating, we're not going to even come close to getting to that number. And realistically, interest rates will go up. So, I mean, we're at historic lows. They're not going to stay this low forever. So, that would be my big takeaway as we've gone through and refined the presentation. This to me became probably the biggest eye opener, and to a lot of the committee as well, as we were talking about this back in the day. So, Andy, we can chat a little bit about, kind of what we've been doing for our outreach campaign. So
sure. Yeah. So the committee's been on this outreach campaign for the last, well, it started with the board of Selectmen at the end of December. And that was sort of our debutante ball coming out and initially unveiling the thoughts of what we were coming forward with. We received great feedback from the board at that time. And then that informed the presentation that evolved out of that. And then that presentation has continued to evolve as we've gone forward and met with other groups. We've met, I don't have the number in front of me, but 3 times with the master plan committee, twice with the planning board, friends of the COA, friends of the library, any number of public presentations and other groups. In the middle of this slide is a screenshot of the webpage, the project webpage for the project. The format's changed a little bit, but There's a tremendous amount of information on there. There's a general summary that you can walk through, and there are links to videos and photos and the reports and everything else. And then on the in the left-hand column, in that blue column, there's another link to the videos, photos, and reports. So if you don't want to read the whole thing, you just want to jump to the videos, easy to do that. The image on the left is a one-page infographic that some of our creative people put together for us. Real high level, talks about the project in sort of general terms, how we got here, what it all means, and what it is that we're proposing, and what it means to at town meeting and at the election. And then there's a QR code at the bottom of that infographic, right under where it says "Voting Yes Means." And so anybody who finds that infographic around town can take a picture of that QR code with their smartphone camera, and it brings them right into that project webpage in the middle that I talked about. So, like I said, summary of the project, there's FAQs, videos, photos, all the reports of HKT, our architectural firm, the estimators, TCI, both their original estimates, as well as a follow-up report that we had them do that informed that $27 million rehab that Bill talked about a few minutes ago on the existing buildings. So a lot of information for people. So then going forward, the board is certainly aware of the calendar and the schedule. June 5th is town meeting, and that'll take place on the field behind Memorial Hall here at 48 South Main Street. Because we're borrowing, this requires a 2/3 vote, and I've said this pretty much every time I've talked about it. Doesn't matter what we're borrowing for, the scope or the dollar amount is irrelevant. If we're borrowing, it requires a 2/3 vote under Massachusetts law. So it's a high bar. There's no question about that, and so that's a lot of why we're out every night trying to sell this project and convince people and have direct contact with people on the merits and the needs of this project. The following Saturday, June 12th, is the annual town election. Selectmen, School Committee, Planning Board, Masco School Committee, as well as question 1. There is one question on the ballot, and that is the Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion question for this project. That is a simple majority vote for approval. If we're fortunate enough to get approval at town meeting and at the ballot, we'll go right into design, and first thing we'll do is hire an owner's project manager. We're required to do that for a project of this size. The OPM is our clerk of the works, if you want to think of it that way in older terminology. They work for us. They are our eyes and ears in dealing with the design team to make sure that our interests are being protected, and a good fallback to have a good backup for us in this process. We expect design to take about a year. So in a year or so, we would be going out to bid with construction starting later in 2022 and lasting about 2 years. And then if all goes well, occupancy in 2024. So that's where we are. And I'll turn it back over to Bill to close it out and entertain any questions.
So we just want to thank you for the time. I mean, we were hoping that the selectmen would take a position and hopefully support the project. So we'd be happy to answer any questions that we could, and I think that's about all we have.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Bill. Well done on the presentation. Thank you, Wendy. From board members or anyone, do we have any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I know we can acknowledge the fact that we've been at this a long time, and since 2019, we've worked hard. We've worked really hard, and I spent some time looking at some Old Town reports, And the issues of the space constraints at the fire station go back to the late 1960s. There's been numerous committees, there's been numerous town meetings where things have been discussed about renovations and additions, and they've been shown. When the library project was in its infancy, there was discussion about an addition and renovation to the fire station occurring simultaneously, and that was shot down. The only thing that we had received from that project was a shared septic system because we were under a DEP order to replace a failing septic system at the fire station. We know the issues with the police station. We spent a total of $1 on that shell, like a hand-me-down trailers from Hal Manning, and we did have an appropriation on the garage addition. Memorial Hall, if my mother were alive, she'd be 100 years old this year. She was a student in that school, so going back to the late 1920s, and I'm sure the floors were just as squeaky back then. And the senior center is woefully inadequate for our seniors. And, honestly, I feel really bad when I drive by there and I see the parking lot crowded and they're trying to maneuver, and it's just not right. But the question that I do have in closing is relative to our legislative delegation. And why is it that since 1991, when the jail opened, we have protected the largest correctional facility in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts? We also protect a 60-bed juvenile detention facility that cost $60 million. And there was more recently a regional lockup that was constructed at 20 Manning Ave. We faithfully protected those facilities over a long period of time, and we receive absolutely nothing for that. I think when we talk about speaking to our legislative delegation and having them speak loudly about certain issues, I think they should be speaking really loudly about this issue, because I'm sure there's other communities in the Commonwealth that receive money from the state if they are a host community to a correctional facility. Thank you.
Chief, you are
Thank you, sir.
absolutely right on the issue of costs associated with the state facilities in our property. I know we've, when I was in the legislature in 1996 and the prison bond bill came in, I was actually the only member that voted against it because at the time there was no funding there to support the town in their expenses. I mean, as your time as chief, the volume of your responses, both fire apparatus and medical aid apparatus to the jail comes close to far outstripping the volume of service that are provided to the community as a whole. Same goes for the DYS facility, same goes for now we have other facilities that are either on Middleton land that no tax dollars are able to be received from. I know we've talked to both our current state representatives and our senator about pilot payments. While there's a belief that some of the county facilities aren't being reimbursed for pilot payments back in 1996, Middleton House of Correction was the only facility in Massachusetts that was not getting any pilot payments. I want to give a big thank you to former Sheriff Frank Cousins, who recognized this for a long period of time and had struck an agreement with us that was providing some in lieu of cost to us, both training to the fire department and some costs for cruisers. Unfortunately, the current sheriff blew that relationship up and walked away from the contract that we signed, but further continued what I think is the inequity there. The reality is many times we get penalized for having those facilities in our town. A perfect example is during the height of COVID, we were listed as one of the those red communities of high transmission, and the governor at the time was looking to kind of slap us on the wrist until he was finally shown that, the bulk of those, not all, but a bulk of those transmissions of COVID were actually happening in a locked facility. But I think the bigger issue here, Chief, is kind of what you talked about is the years of Band-Aids and deferrals and passing the buck off to future years. From the fire station that, Chief, was built to be a fire and DPW facility. that we now have equipment that are parked outside because we don't have room for it. We just had to put a small addition on the front of the downstairs bay so we could actually fit our equipment and not have it sit outside in the weather and the cold. The police station that we got for $1 and then added 2 modular units on, or as I used to say to Chief DG, he has a double wide for a police station. And so I don't think there's anybody that is questioning the need for this. I mean, our senior center, I'm embarrassed. And I know a lot of seniors that go to other towns to receive services that their tax-paying dollars aren't able to provide in the town. And to a certain extent, Memorial Hall as well. I think of it may be one of our oldest buildings, not as old as the old town hall, but it's one of our oldest buildings, but actually I think is able to serve its need a lot better than it is the other 3 facilities we've talked about. My concern, and I'm going to support this project, but I will tell you my significant concern is the total cost. And I'm not disputing one bit the amount that is saved on paper by doing all 4 projects at once. But I mean, this isn't a secret to anybody. I've been saying this for some time now, that my concern is that the size and scope of this could potentially jeopardize the ability to get a 2/3 vote at town meeting. I'm actually not that concerned about the town election vote, although I don't want to take anything for granted. I'm more concerned about the 2/3 vote. And one of the things, Andy, I'd really like to see us have as well, I really appreciate this is what the cost will be in 2022, 2034, and all the way out at the end years. What I'd really, for the average tax bill, I would like to see the 25th percentile of that, 50th percentile, which is what the average tax bill would be, and the 75th percentile, and then look at that over every single year of the bond. Now, I know there's some assumptions that we're trying to make here, bringing in some revenue that will be sequestered, but I think, for a level of transparency, so folks aren't trying to do math and figure out, well, what is it going to be for my home? Because I know what my home is for for evaluation now, and people can actually make a decision sitting at town meeting or standing in the polling booth or filling out their ballot at home. That's for you, Eileen. Is the ability for folks to actually say, this is what it'll cost me. And then everybody can make their decision on whether or not they believe they can make that investment. I don't think we're having trouble making the argument of we need the investment. I think my big concern right now is this is a lot at once. And I know, and I'm not trying to call anybody out, but I know and I was part of that discussion at town meeting. We talked about phasing this for obvious reasons. And it wasn't that we didn't know it would cost us more to phase it. It was the ability to allow folks to swallow this in smaller chunks, knowing that the total chunk would likely be and is going to be more. And allowing folks to see where the priorities were. I mean, I think our number 1 priority is the fire station. I think our community center, senior center is a very close second, and the police is a very close third. And I think town hall is a very distant 4th in terms of priorities. And my concern is if we go to town meeting and this is too much in this environment, we've got a lot of great news over the last week. Things are starting to turn to normal or whatever the new normal is, but we are still struggling with unemployment rates that are up, people that are still dealing with the financial effects of the pandemic. And I'm really concerned that all the phenomenal work that's been done by this committee, the Master Development Planning Committee, Andy, town officials, department heads, may be stymied because of the cost. And Frank, Chief, you were right. I mean, if you look at the other 2 projects that this town has invested greatly in the last 10 to 15 years, from the library to Howe Manning, both of those projects got significant state reimbursement dollars. The library, the last piece of legislation I got passed when I was in the legislature was about was almost $3 million into the library construction fund, which allowed Middleton to greatly reduce its costs for that. That fund doesn't exist anymore. And obviously the school building authority reimbursement that the town got for Howe Manning. We don't have, well, we have a delegation that's been helpful to us in trying to find ways to earmark dollars for us. We're not going to see anything near that dollar amount that we've seen in the past from the legislature around both the libraries. So we are we are on the hook as a town for this with town taxpayer dollars directly for this. And I am significantly concerned that this is going to be very difficult to reach a 2/3 vote. I hope I am wrong, and I want to be very clear. I am going to be in favor of this in town meeting floor, and I am going to vote in favor of this at town meeting floor because I know the need is there. I am concerned about certain segments of our population that this is, and our taxpayer base, that this is going to be extremely difficult for them. And then the last point, and I'm going to keep my mouth shut, is when we look at our tax rate of the tri-town regions, it's something we should be proud of, but we also have to realize all three of those towns have the same school district, Masconomet and the Tri-Town School Union. Now, you could argue on the elementary side, the investment and the amount of dollars that are being paid into the elementary schools are not the same across the board. As it is for Masco, based on enrollment and the enrollment numbers per town, it's basically the same investment. What I am seeing there is there's likelihood that Topsfield and Boxford has invested more in their municipal side of the ledger. Their library, their public works, their police, their fire, their council on aging. I am not saying that we haven't invested, but I think we've had many, many years as our percentage of our budget has exploded on the education side that we have not been able to keep pace on the municipal side. We have tried to turn that corner appropriately and realistically over the last 5 to 6 years, but I think we still have work to do. I mean, Chief, you many years were talking about the need for more full-time firefighters. We've slowly done that. Chief DG was talking about that. We've slowly done that. We finally, I think 6 years ago, added our first public works employee in probably 25 years in terms of the numbers. That has proven to me that we have probably, while we've deferred maintenance on our facilities, we've deferred a lot of investment in our municipal side of the ledger as well. And while I do understand that our tax rate is lower, I also want to state there's a reason for that, because we've also deferred some investment in some other areas that we've been slowly trying to rectify. And I do not want to see that be derailed either. So, but again, I support this. I thank you, Bill, and your committee for all the work that you've done on this. Not lost in me when volunteers put themselves up. You're not doing it for the FaceTime on Zoom meetings, and I get that, or visiting a lot of the groups around town. I appreciate that. That's just my big concern that I wanted to state.
Oh, well, thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, Rick, I just
ahead,
wanted to say that I support this project because it is the most cost-effective way to meet our needs over a 30-year period. Are there less expensive ways, to do things in the short term? Yes, but those have longer term consequences by having to borrow at a later point in time to address other needs at a very likely higher cost escalation on construction. So if you are able to look at the 30-year period and what the cost is over that 30-year period to have adequate facilities for our employees and our equipment. And over the course of time, we have invested in our people, in their training, and the equipment. If we can't give them an adequate place to store the equipment and to work from, we are not really doing our best for the employees that protect and serve us. So if we're able to look over a 30-year period, I think it's clear that this is the most cost-effective solution. So I will move that we endorse this project.
Okay, we have a motion to recommend to endorse. Do we have a second?
Second,
We have a motion and a second. All right, then if I can, I'll ask the clerk, Selectman Hooton, to take a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Cresta,
Yes.
Mr. Pentakis,
Yes,
Mr. Cassiotis.
If I would, I want to say one thing, and that's I don't think we need, while I appreciate the efforts of everybody working towards this, we don't need any tours to know that the 4 buildings that we have are antiquated, to say the least. You know, I understand as a taxpayer that things are expensive, but when I got involved in town leadership, I didn't do it for myself. I did it for what I thought was going to be better for the town as a whole. And while I concur with my fellow select members, that things are difficult to get done in town sometimes. And we've seen that in the past. Chief Twist has mentioned that with how things worked out with the jail. But for myself, I have to vote as a selectman of the town of Middleton, and I will vote in favor to recommend for this project.
And myself is a yes, so that would be unanimous.
Thank you. So that motion carries unanimously, and I want to thank everybody involved with taking on such a big topic for us. This is a big turning point for us in town, and I'm glad that we were able to get this recommendation vote tonight and line us up for the all-important town meeting on June 5th. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes,
you.
thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right. So then with that, if we can, I'd like to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a review and vote on an application for Blue Bonnet Consulting for a change of manager for Merritt Boston North Operated LLC, doing business as Doubletree Boston North Shore Hotel at 50 Village Drive, from Kevin Varr to Andrew Dunn, manager. This is something we've come accustomed to seeing at least a couple times a year. Do we have anybody with us tonight on behalf of Blue Bonnet Consulting?
Mr. Chairman, I don't see anybody on from Blue Bonnet.
Can I ask, are we, I know we've had issues in the past where, you know, this kind of thing has come up and it's come up to us in a late fashion. Are you aware, Andy, of whether or not they're, you know, have we been going a while now up there without the right name on the license?
No, we haven't. So Blue Bonnet is the consulting firm that represents this hotel group. They were on last year when we approved the change of manager to Kevin Varr. They heard loud and clear the concerns and frustrations that the board had about the history on that property. When Mr. Varr left, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, Whitney Gillings, who is the applicant's representative, immediately reached out to me and provided a letter with the formal notice that Mr. Varr had left the operation, and that they would be applying within a month, and they applied within 2 or 3 weeks. So they are honoring the not only the intent, but the letter of what the board laid down last year when the most recent change of manager was proposed.
Yeah, I appreciate that greatly. I think they heard clearly from this board as we had delayed and then very loudly explained that that wasn't going to happen again. So
yeah, they've been very responsive.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I also appreciate how they accommodated the town when we needed meeting space for interviews, and how they've actually stepped up, albeit paid for it, but stepped up and became the regional vaccination site, which I think was great for our residents. So,
yeah, Andy, was Andrew Dunn a previous license holder? Because I remember that name.
Yeah, it seems like a familiar name, and I don't know that he was. I didn't have a chance to check, but I think
We wanna
Just
put
about
it up.
everybody has been a previous license holder there, so.
at least
Well,
one
yeah,
manager.
I think, when the current management group took over the hotel, Andrew Dunn was the license holder, and then Kate
Real Daily.
Bill Daly.
came in and was there.
She was the general manager because we were having a problem. You're right, Costa. We were having a problem that their food and beverage manager was changing more often than their general manager.
So, I'm pretty sure that, Andrew Dunn has been a previous license holder at this facility. So I think he's familiar with the property.
And we'll immediately reach out and make sure he's aware of the concerns over the years that the board has had.
I mean, I
All right.
get that it's a facility that has become a training ground and folks come in, stay a period of time, and then move out to other facilities or leave the organization. But I appreciate that they were much more timely and we weren't looking at 3 months without a licensed manager there.
Same. I'm pleased to know that we weren't corrected. We weren't on the hook like we have been so many times in the past with that address. If
So do we want to vote or
so
do we want to push it off till next meeting?
should
I
we bring them in and we don't have to do this tonight, right? When we bring them in.
I mean,
push this
I'm to be honest with you, I'm comfortable if the application seems to be in order, Andy, and the information that has been provided, background checks and all of the documentation is complete. Quite honestly, if we're going to be firm in our position that they need to be timely with us, I think we need to be as timely as possible, unless there's anything missing from their documents. If there's not, I think we should just approve this. Quite honestly, I don't want to wait 2 more weeks without a approved manager on the books down there.
I agree with Brian.
Okay. I mean, yeah, all the documents, appear to be what they need to
Okay,
be.
then, I'll make the motion.
Okay, thanks, Tim. And a
I'll second.
Motion and a second, if I could ask Mr. Hooton to take a roll
Mr.
call
Cresta,
vote.
Yes,
Mr. Protakis,
Yes.
Mr. Cassiotis,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
All right, thank you. The motion carries unanimously. And we will move on to item number 5, which is a presentation of the 2021 third quarter financial report by Chief Financial Officer Sarah Wood.
Oh, you picked the wrong night.
Yeah, I know. Right?
I didn't pick the night.
It was picked for her.
Yeah. Can everyone hear me okay?
yes.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet since everybody has basically heard this already during our budget process, as I gave updates as we were trying to get the budget to be balanced. As of March 31st, 71% of the budget was spent in the general fund. That does include 87% in the unclassified category. If we take out the unclassified, we're at about just under 70%. So we're well within the 75% benchmark that we set for ourselves when it comes to the budget spending process over the quarters. The majority of the categories are spending very much below where they should be for departments. Obviously, the Recreation Commission, that's usually one that we see having the majority of their budget spent by this time, with not only the previous year's program, but also planning for the next year's program. Right now, their budget has been spent, nothing of their budget has been spent, but we do expect to see some of their budget spent as we plan for the 2021 summer season, as they purchase some supplies and things of that nature. But since the program typically doesn't start till after the 4th of July, it's minimal spending within that category. Snow and ice is at only 91% of the budget, so we will actually end the year without the need of a free cash transfer. We do have an article in there, so there'll be no action taken on that warrant article at town meeting. And then as it's the third quarter, we usually look to see how other departments are trending throughout the rest of the year. There's only 2 departments that I see any potential concern for. One is the fire department. There was a lot of apparatus maintenance and repairs done on various vehicles. I think they have enough money within their budget that they won't need a transfer, but in case, I'm going to recommend a departmental transfer that the Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen will need to approve before the end of the fiscal year. And also our property and liability insurance has actually overspent this year, mainly because, as I mentioned in previous meetings, we didn't get as many Meyer rewards credits as we usually do. That is an offset to our premium, mainly because of COVID-19. A lot of the trainings that we usually partake in didn't happen. They didn't have a lot of the programs that they usually do. And we
Sarah,
also...
Sarah,
Yeah.
didn't we get a little bit of a premium reward?
For health insurance.
Yes.
But
So
this is for property and liability.
Oh, property and liability. Okay, my
Yep.
apologies.
No problem. And then we also got a notary insurance this year, which was an unbudgeted cost of just under $1,000. But we felt it was worth it as we did our renewal interview with Maya, that it was a worthwhile investment to make within the town. So I'll have a minimal departmental transfer to present for that to come out of the health insurance budget, because we did see so much savings within the health insurance budget this year. I'll be proposing removing from health insurance to property and liability insurance. Any questions on expenditures so far? Okay.
Nope.
As far as revenues go, we were, as of March 31st, at 77.9% of our budget. That's above our 75% benchmark. So we were trending well overall. This is both real estate, personal property, local receipts, everything. There were several categories within our local receipts specifically that did not meet that 75% benchmark, mainly rooms, library, fines and forfeitures, and investment income. Obviously, rooms, we all know, it's been trending well below where we usually see it. We did reduce our budget significantly during the recap period, but we're still only at about a 46% collection rate for rooms. We do hope that with the vaccine clinic being within the DoubleTree Hotel, that there'll be some kind of relief to the town as well, that they may have had to pay local property tax, local rooms tax on that. But we're not sure exactly, since that doesn't come out till June 30th when we get that payment. Fines and forfeitures is pretty much just made up of police fines, and there hasn't been a lot of activity within the police department, both on the local and at the state level, that we see off of 114. So it's not unexpected that that would be trending below, as well as our investment income. And the library has also been closed for the majority of the year to the public. So their revenue that's come in has been minimal. As of yesterday, however, our revenues are trending at 98% of the budget overall. So I feel pretty confident that we're going to meet the majority of our revenue budget, if not exceed it minimally. The categories that are doing well enough to offset the categories that are not doing so well. And as well as our expenditures are currently trending between 90 and 95% of the budget for the rest of the fiscal year. So we will see some significant budget savings this year, which will help offset any revenue shortfalls as well, to add to free cash at the end of the year. And then CPA is trending where it should be. All of the expenditures that were budgeted, other than capital projects, have been spent, which is primarily debt service and admin costs. And we are at 93% of budgeted revenues as of March 31st. And then as far as the water and enterprise fund goes, expenditures are only at about 52% of the budget, which isn't unexpected, since it's a lot of stormwater maintenance, water sampling, and hydrant flushing that happens in the spring, as well as an emergency reserve of $50,000 in the budget overall that has not been spent at all this year. On the revenue side for the water fund, we've only collected 19% of revenue. It's actually up year over year. But the majority of the budget is made up from a payment from the town of Danvers that we get in June. So we don't see that revenue till the end of the fiscal year. I won't go into any of the other tables unless anybody has questions on anything specifically, but.
On the real estate tax revenue.
Yep.
What's the percentage of that? I know your overall revenue, you mentioned 98%, but
Yep.
just on real estate tax.
For so far through May?
If you have it, or.
Yep. We are at 99.9%.
Right.
For
So-
real estate, and personal property is at 96%.
All right. What accounts for the difference in percentage between the CPA and real estate?
So with real estate, it's primarily, we're only at 99% because a lot of it is previous levy years. So that takes all the levy years into account, where there was more significant outstanding for real estate than for CPA at the end of last year.
Okay.
So that's really what the difference between the two are.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Sarah, are we seeing, for all intents and purposes for the current fiscal year tax bills, we are seeing pretty timely collection?
We are. Belinda just finished doing her tax title today, actually. There are there's a good number of them going into tax title for this year, and a few that are larger in dollar amounts. I don't have the totals in front of me. I didn't take notes for that. But overall, actually, I can tell you as of April how much was outstanding still, if you just bear with me one moment. I'm just pulling up my receivable reconciliation, which of course through VPN is never quick. So overall, for all real estate bills outstanding, we still have a balance as of April of about 2.5 million, but the majority of that came in May. Because there is a few larger mortgage bills that come in right when the bills are due, which this year was in May. So
okay.
But I do know that there are some larger payments that are still outstanding that have not been made for this levy year. But overall, the collection rate is much better than we were at this time last year. Because if you remember, we also delayed when bills were due last year.
Yeah.
So that kind of delayed a lot of the collection into this fiscal year, which is why we're seeing rates up to already 99.9% in May.
Got it. One additional question, Sarah, extrapolating about what you've seen in the last quarter for meals tax. Obviously, I understand lodging revenue is likely to stay down for some time. And for that facility where we get the bulk of the lodging revenue, or we get all of our lodging revenue from, until business travel picks up significantly, we're probably not going to see much. Although I will state that with the sanctions being lifted by the governor, the water park can now open, which I think you may see an increase there. But if you extrapolated out what you've seen recently on meals tax revenue, do you feel very comfortable that we are on a track for the number that we are proposing for the next fiscal year is going to be strong enough? And if possibly, have we possibly underestimated?
So I would say we probably have honestly underestimated by just a little bit. I think we're closer to actual. If we extrapolate out, we're already in May, we're about, March 31st, I should say, since it's quarterly payments. 86% of our $180,000 budget for FY21. If you extrapolate that out, you're into about just under $210,000. So I think we're within the ballpark. I don't think we made any incorrect decisions when we set the budget. We may even be able to, depending on what the payment is, when we set the tax rate, do a little bit of an adjustment to that if need be, if we ended up bringing in more money in the fourth quarter. But again, in June, you have to remember it only goes through May 31st. So we won't see the full effect of all the sanctions being lifted until September.
And in the next fiscal year, we should see two large seating restaurants that will be operational. One that's opening up this week, and another one, if construction goes as planned, will be opening up in the fall.
Correct.
Okay.
So all these things will help to increase that. I don't think we should, adjust the budget on these assumptions, of course, because you never know timing-wise or anything. But if anything, it would be just in excess to free cash at the end of the year. And then we can, as we set our 2023 budget, look at it with a more accurate and non-COVID kind of revenue source.
I'll take the free cash every year.
Does anyone else have any specific questions or anything?
I have a comment.
Sure.
As usual, on the appropriation fund.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful if there was one more column that showed the balance. As I look at the report, I think I see the balance on 331, and I think the revenue as of 331 is included. And then there's an appropriation of 621. So I think if I do the arithmetic, I can come up with a balance, but I'm not sure.
George, which page are you on? I'm sorry.
Page 10.
Page 10. So what this is showing is the fund balance is the balance in all those funds. That's how much money exists in those funds to be spent. The second column for revenue as of 3/31 is how much money other than transfers in that we've done, because that's usually the appropriation column. Since the budget has kind of been set, I already put in the FY22, so that's what we plan to either add or remove from those budgets, from those funds to supplement our budget or to transfer in. So can you say your question one more time, George?
I see the balance as of 3/31. I see the revenue as of 3/31, which I assume is included in the 913. And
Yes.
And then there's an appropriation of 621. So I'm saying if I do the arithmetic, I guess I can figure out the balance.
So you want okay, that makes sense. The balance after the appropriation?
Yeah.
Okay.
It'd be nice to have that printed out for us.
Sure. So usually when I do this, and this is, I'll definitely add the column when I start to add in the next fiscal year. Usually when I do this, it only has the FY21 values, which is also included in the fund balance. But anytime I add in the next fiscal year, I'll make sure to add that column, especially when I do my June 30th, George. I'll make sure that's included. Because that is a good thing to see. I don't disagree with that.
I'm getting lazy in my old age.
Okay, any other comments or?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Sarah.
Have a great night.
You too.
You too. Good night. All right, good news on that front. So let's move on to number 6, which is going to be a request to change a road name at 123 River Street. The board has been asked to reconsider the decision of naming the road, and a new proposed name is Drumlin Road, Circle or Way. I just want to remind everyone that last meeting we agreed to name it after Messenger Way, and that was after Pike Messenger. And while he was flattered and honored that we selected him, he thought that a more appropriate name for that area would be Drumlin Road, which had some historic significance to that area specifically. So no one has any other comments or discussion?
Yeah, I'm not interested in reconsidering. I think Pike is being too humble, and he deserves the recognition. So yeah, I'm inclined to decline his request.
Okay.
Wow, Costa Printakis playing hardball.
All right.
I'm not going against Costa.
I'm not going against Costa, and I guess I'm going against Pike, so I'm with Costa.
Well, my vote wouldn't matter. Mine would be moot at that point. So, all right, then.
So, Andy, I guess you contact Pike and tell him thanks, but no thanks, but we're honoring him.
I will do that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pike, as well. All right, so on to item number 7, which will be review and assign regional information technology memorandum of understanding. Mr. Sheehan, if you would explain that for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually going to have Tanya
Oh, I'm
talk
sorry.
about this, since she has been the point person on the regional IT.
Excellent,
Sure.
Tanya. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you should have just a little brief synopsis as well as a copy of the memorandum of understanding in your packet. This is the culmination in some senses and the beginning of our formalized agreement with 6 other towns into an IT collaborative. The amount that we're outlaying over the next fiscal year is just a little over $4,000, the same as the other smaller towns, not Danvers. We'll also be putting into this. The primary reason for that is we're in essence buying a portion of their IT director's time to work on, be a resource for us, as well as work on security across the various towns and things like that. We're also putting out very soon an RFQ regarding a vendor that we're hoping to use across the towns, although towns will be able to essentially join that when they're ready for that. But we're hoping just to put more standardization into place and then connect ourselves by fiber to Danvers, and then Danvers will eventually be able to offer us other services, sort of as an a la carte way if they want to host or do backup services. So that's essentially what this memorandum of understanding is. It formalizes what we've been working towards for, almost 2 years now, I think. So yeah, does anyone have any questions or comments on this?
So Danvers is going to be the hub, so to speak?
Yes. Mm-hmm. They're the only town in this collaborative that has professional IT on staff. So they've been a great resource for us informally over this time. And now we're formalizing this and moving forward with some other initiatives collectively.
Is there any discussion in the communities that'll be in this collaborative of anything school-based IT in the future?
There isn't anything formally now. It's been enough of a lift to get all of us moving in the same direction, but that's certainly possible. This memorandum of understanding even anticipates that there might be other surrounding towns that might want to join us, and or schools that might want to join in the future. So that's a possibility.
As we're bringing the fiber into Danvers, how long is that run going to be?
How long is it physically going to be?
Yeah.
Well, it's our hope. We're working on the exact configuration, but they've already run fiber relatively close to the border, and so we would hook it up there. And
okay.
So
this isn't being run from here straight to Danvers Town Hall.
No, they've got it, I think, in all of their municipal buildings and some other outposts. So for instance, there's a fire station that's closer to Middleton, and also we're hoping, the plan is to go to the jail, the rec center, and all be connected there as well. So that's the route that the fibers we're planning for it to take.
Okay, so it would be the fire station in Hawthorne that would likely be where we'd be heading to.
I think that's where their endpoint is in Danvers currently.
Okay.
So it would, go down 62.
Okay, thank you.
And, does Danvers have, enough people capacity to handle the issues for the other towns, since in essence, we're buying a portion of their time?
Yeah, I forget exactly. They've got, I believe, 7 IT professionals on staff. They've been building out a lot of capacity. They've got multiple data center sites there. So they've been really focused on their IT infrastructure, as well as having a really supportive town manager, Steve Bartha, who's interested in collaborating. So he's been great in terms of lending us Colby Cousins in the meantime to move towards this. So they do have a lot of capacity, but the plan for the future would be that we would all be using, one consulting services, that consultant that Danvers would then manage. So it wouldn't necessarily be that the Danvers staff would be coming and doing on-site things, but that they would be managing a third-party vendor.
So is it anticipated that that vendor would be kind of like a task order type vendor? So it would be a vendor for all within the collaborative, but if Middleton was using the vendor for A, B, and C, we would be paying the vendor for that? Or is it being paid for by Danvers as part of a global effort and we're just assigned a percentage of it?
No, right now we're actually looking into getting prices because I think several of you know the IT pricing structure can go in various ways. So we're asking for per seat prices as well as hourly prices so that then each town will individually buy into the contract. The vendor should be on the state contract that we're looking at right now. And so, if Middleton's ready before Topsfield or, at a different time at Manchester by the Sea, that's okay. We'll be moving towards that vendor. The hope is everyone will move towards that vendor, but it might be on different timelines. And so we would be billed directly for their time.
Okay. All right. Thank you. This is definitely going to help. I think it's a trend that we'll see with other areas that municipalities face when it comes to upgrading things like this and public health matters and the like. So this is good to see this happen.
So I'll move that we sign the Regional Information Technology Memorandum of Understanding.
Thank you. And a second. Motion and a second. If Tim, if you could take a vote, please.
Sure. Mr. Cresta,
Yes.
Mr. Prentakis,
Yes.
Mr. Cassiotis,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
All right. Motion carries unanimously. Tanya, thank you very much for your efforts in this, and it'll definitely have. We'll feel its impact for sure. Thank you very much. Where are we here? All right, if we can now, I'd like to have see if we have anything new to add to our annual town meeting and town elections, or any updates as needed.
Just a couple of things, Mr. Chairman. We've got a lot of logistics that came into organizing this town meeting this year, having it outdoors, having it under a tent on a Saturday, full AV, and so we've got that all lined up. A few local things that we'll be doing in the next couple of weeks, just to make sure that we've got the smaller pieces in place. But we feel very good about where we are right now in terms of the logistics. The warrant book we found out today the printing is complete on that. The jail did that this year. They did not do that for us last year because of COVID and some challenges that they had. So we're happy to use them again. So we'll get that to the post office in the next 2 days, I would say. And so that should start arriving in people's mailboxes maybe as early as the weekend, as Saturday. And other than that, not a lot to add, other than just a reminder for the public that town meeting is Saturday, June 5th, beginning at 9 o'clock and going until we finish. And then the town election is the following Saturday, June 12th, from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. I know the clerk is on. I don't know if she has anything to add. I don't want to put her on the spot. She's kind of shy, but would let her speak if she has anything to add.
Oh, yeah, I'm shy.
Hi, Elaine.
Hi, everyone. I just want to remind all our voters that we are in full early voting swing in our office, Monday through Thursday, 9 to 1. And then we're in the afternoon. And so we're happy to make an appointment for people to come in between 1 and 4 to early vote. And we have one more long session. We did this past Friday. We were there till 8 p.m. in the office. Wednesday, June 2nd, we'll be there from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. for another long day of early voting, and last day to register to vote. before the town election. Other than that, mail-in voting is in full swing as well. We've sent out probably close to 600 ballots already. And we're getting a fair return. So we'll see how it all goes. So I just wanted to make sure that that got out there so that people can take advantage of early voting. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Eileen.
You're welcome.
Okay, item number 9 on the tonight's agenda will be an updates for reopening plans for municipal buildings and facilities. Mr. Sheehan, please.
So the best laid plans of mice and men got upended a little bit by the governor's announcement yesterday. So we were going to talk a little bit about how things are, how we were planning to move things forward. Things are going to accelerate quite a bit. So suffice to say, we would expect to be back open full-time in person by June 15th or thereabouts. And we're still working on and waiting for some additional direction from the governor's office regarding things like in-person meetings versus Zoom meetings that we've been doing, and if there's going to be some sort of a hybrid transition that is allowed, and either as a transition or as a permanent change to the law. My guess is because the legislature is still involved in the operating budget for the coming year, it's going to be hard to get them to take up some longer term things like permanent hybrid meeting or permanent remote meeting approach. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is an interim or transitory guidance that would carry for a couple of months or something like that, so that longer term permanent legislative changes can take place. That's not based on any inside intel that I've got. It's just an assumption based on everything that is going on in Beacon Hill and cursory understanding of legislative process. So we'll have more updates.
Just so you know, town councils have said that because of the emergency nature of this, that it's all back, and unless the legislature moved, it's all back.
Yeah. I just think that there are intricacies of this that I don't know that were contemplated, prior to yesterday. Just as one example, planning board hearings, zoning board hearings, things like that. There's a long lead time for those, typically 3 to 4 weeks, sometimes longer, depending on what the schedule is. And so we have a question here about hearings that are going to be, that will take place after June 15th, but the legal ads need to be submitted around the beginning of June. And do we need to advertise for a Zoom component to that, or is that going to be all in place? We haven't worked out the details yet in terms of meeting in the schools again before the close of the school year. So we got to work through some of those things, but we'll be doing that over the next 2 weeks and have a fuller update for the board and the public on June 1st at our next meeting.
Andy, is there any, there's nothing that's prohibiting this board or any of our boards from having in-person meeting and keeping a Zoom component to it, correct?
Correct.
Unless it's a public hearing and somebody is, I guess the testimony that somebody may be giving remotely that is not an actual voting member of that board or committee. And that would, I guess, be up to the chairperson of that committee to determine whether or not they want to take that testimony. Because I hope one of the things that comes out of this 14 plus months of being remote is that we keep the piece of Zoom component, because we've never had so many people attend our meetings. Not that we wouldn't want George Dow in person at our meeting, but I love seeing that George can be a part of our meeting as we're remote. Secondly, the piece of being able to live stream as well. While many folks can view us through our cable channel, the reality is more and more folks that are cutting the cord on cable. And while a town meeting article a year or two ago was asking us to expand our cable TV recording, I mean, we have the great opportunity of being able to fulfill that need pretty easily without having to expand a lot of equipment and manpower time to that effort.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Brian. And one of the questions, or the question about hybrid meetings was, if you have board members that either have not been vaccinated or for whatever reason may not be ready to come back in person yet, and you don't have a quorum in person, which is what's required under the pre-COVID remote participation rules. You had to have a quorum physically present in the room.
Yeah, because this board had adopted a procedure that a member could dial in if that effort came up, but it didn't count towards the quorum.
Right.
Okay.
So those are the little things that we.
Well, there's another issue that's come up that I was thinking about today. So with June 15th being the date when all state restrictions are being lifted, and as I understand, is the governor ending the state of emergency on that date? I would expect that now we as a board are going to have to make a decision around some of the outside dining in town that has occurred due to the pandemic. I'm thinking of, the old
Maggie's.
Yeah, the old Maggie's. I assume the new restaurant there was going to operate with the tent that's out there under the process. I know Freddie's had inquired about reopening the outside dining. I assume what happens now is they would have to fall through the normal process of getting an approval of outside dining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the bigger question, or the bigger wrinkle for those establishments, not so much Freddie's, but any liquor serving establishment, is you were not allowed to serve liquor outside the four walls of your establishment in the past. I think with the new Maggie's being the only exception to that, where they could serve on their.
They have a set up. I think the new Maggie's, and I think Teresa's within their license allowed it to be served out on their patio.
Yes. Right. And so there's that wrinkle in what is the ABCC role. And so those are the things that I think will, they're not monumental issues, but I think those are the things that are going to crop up, and that the governor and the legislature may seek to fix in the near term, even if it's only for a transitionary period.
Okay. All right.
Well, these are good problems to have, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll take these all day long.
Right.
For what it's worth, let me just state this around outside dining. I mean, I think while it became a blessing to a lot of these restaurants and establishments that were able to hang on during the hardest time, and some customers were able to frequent when they were not willing to enter the facility, I mean, I hope some of these restaurants that may want to continue will explore the opportunity. Now they'll have to go through the regular process, but I think as a town we should, as appropriate, welcome that. I think it's been a great addition to our, I'm not going to call it the restaurant scene in Middleton, but to some of our restaurants, and a opportunity to sit outside and have an omelet in the morning with some friends, in a nice weather day. It may not be for all the restaurants, they may not want to continue, but I think as a town and this board who provides, the ultimate approval as it relates to a victualler license and or alcohol license, if the ABCC so approves, I think we should explore that as appropriate. I don't want to see temporary tents being erected in parking lots in a non-pandemic environment, but I think some of this outside dining as appropriate has added to the town. And that's something we should explore and maybe come up with some policies as a board that, because I would not be surprised if some of these restaurants don't come back and want to continue this.
Sure, there'll be some. And it'd be wise for us to have something in place going forward. I mean, I don't know how many more new ones construction-wise we'll get, but we'll have that. We'll have that. Those items in place. All right. All right. Well, thank you for that. And we'll move on to number 10, which is going to be a vote to accept the following gifts and grants. We have an anonymous donation to the Middleton Food Pantry in the amount of $500 and a Sustainable Materials Recovery Program grant for the Mass Department of Environmental Protection in the amount of $16,164.34 to be used for the transportation of recycling mattresses from the transfer station.
Do we get that many do we get that many mattresses?
I don't know how they came.
That's one mattress, Brian.
It's one big mattress. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I'll make such a motion to accept.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
And a second. All right. If I could ask Tim, please take the roll call vote.
Mr. Cresta,
Yes.
Mr. Prentakis,
Yes.
Mr. Cassiotis,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
All right. Motion carries unanimously. And as always, we thank them for their donations to the town. All right. Unless we have any other new business that we're not aware of right now, then I'm going to notify that we will take a vote to enter executive session. And as a result, we will not be returning to open session.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we enter executive session under General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, as it is respect to contract negotiations with the collective bargaining unit.
All right, thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. And once again, Tim, if you would please, a roll call vote.
Mr. Cresta,
Yes.
Mr. Prentakis,
Yes.
Mr. Cassiotis,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
All right. Then we will take a motion to adjourn and we will enter executive session and we will not be returning to open session. Thank you to those others and good night.